Yes, Minkela Dorong, today we're trying to break down the state of the nation address by the president, meaning for ordinary Gambians and stuff like that. Mimbe Jeolong Nyintiko Malong, when you listen to the president's address, your honest reaction, opinion about it.
Thank you very much, Ablai, for having me. This, I think, it is a very important discussion because when we talk about the SONA address, that is the President's State of the Union address, or if you like call it, this is more like trying to fulfill a constitutional mandate on what the government has been up to over the course of last year. That is the government expenditures. And first, talking about the future plans, the achievements that the government has. So, if you ask me what's my honest opinion about the whole issue of the State of the Union address, I can say it comes in two folds for me. First, I see some positivity in the speech. I think one of the positive side of the speech is the timing of the speech itself. The timing in the sense that last State of the Union address was done, I think, in the second quarter, somewhere around June. But this time around, it happens in the first quarter, which is something, brilliant for me. Brilliant in the sense that because when you are talking about the government expenditure, future plans, and also in the name of transparency and accountability, I think it is uh, quite important that you do this speech in the first quarter. Thereby, people can at least hold you accountable whether what you promise or what you pledge you deliver on those public goods or not. So the timing, I can say that I have to, in fact, the entire country needs to congratulate the president, the government for at least doing this much earlier this time around. And that is one thing about it. That is the one positive side I take from this thing. The other positive that I pick from this speech is when the president talk about the establishment of a specialized court to speedy the gender-based violence trials. This is also welcoming. Welcoming in the sense that I think Gambia is the sixth African country to have if they happen to establish it, because it's going to be in the second quarter, if it happens to materialize, Gambia will be the sixth African country to have established a court of that nature. So this is something which is very right. The importance of it is because I believe that perpetrators of this gender-based violence needs to be held accountable for their activities, and also the victims also need justice for this. So the president mentioning this, I think it is also a welcoming development. But other than that, I see most of the negativity, which because the report itself is more like a normal report that the government do, like the usual reporting of government expenditures, the achievements, and also future plans. So in totality, these are the my take when I listen to the president make this remark the other day.
Yeah, other than that, is there any other thing that stood out to you the most and why?
I think what also stood out to me has something to do with remittance, that is the economy. Because if if I'm right with the numbers, yeah, I think in 2025, the remittance that was sent by the diaspora Gambians stand around $872 million. That is around $55 billion. Yet, these people were denied their voting right to have a say in the governance structure of the country. This is something which is mind-boggling for me. Mind-boggling in the sense that I believe that if you need my money, I should have a say in the running of the day-to-day affairs of the country.
Absolutely.
So this is something that also stood out for me clearly, because I was trying to weigh the contribution of the diaspora, because without their contribution, I don't see the Gambia in terms of economic resilience that the government is talking about. Even at that, the government also talked about the economic stability in the country, which is baffling because that doesn't reflect the reality on the ground, union address.
And also, was there anything you expected to hear but you didn't hear?
Well, the other thing that I was hoping to hear from the president has more to do with individual security or in the country. Okay, the government briefly talk about the security, especially the security sector reforms, which we have to commend the government of the Gambia for it. However, we also need to differentiate the two things here. We are talking about state security and also individual security. Individual security is more dealing with protecting the lives and properties of average Gambian. So if you look at recent data, because several studies have been conducted on this issue, so data indicates that when it comes to state security, that is pretty much fine, relatively stable country. But when it comes to individuals, when it comes to individuals protecting the lives and properties of individuals, it is on the rise. So I was hoping to hear policy strategies that the government is going to spell out to at least curb these issues, but I did not hear issues of that nature during the speech. So that is the disappointing part for me.
And do you think the speech reflects reality or there was a gap?
Obviously, like I mentioned, this is more like it's more like a descriptive reporting because what I was hoping to hear is more of the value creation of the government activity. So I'm not, I didn't get this in the speech because I was hoping to hear the outcomes of the policies or the government activities that they embark on during the course of the year 2025. Does it, impact on the lives of average Gambians, the policies that they are talking about? So I was more in trying to listen to, trying to get the understanding from that perspective, but it's more like a descriptive reporting that focus basically on inputs rather than the outcomes or the impact. So the impact is not emphasized because when you talk about policy, policy is basically what? Policy, this is just it's a statement of intent. That's what policy is all about. So public policy comes in the domain of public. So that is the citizen. So at the end of the policy, because every policy aims to address something. Any policy that you see, it aims to address a particular problem, to improve the life and the livelihood of citizens. So if you are just trying to do a descriptive reporting of the policies without mentioning the impact, the value creation, then there is a problem in it. So the speech itself, that is the State of the Union address that the president made itself is problematic. Problematic in the sense that I think it deviates from the outcomes, and that is what analysts will always want to hear. What are the outcomes? What impact it creates in the lives of people. That's what I'm interested in. So that's another disappointing part for me.
Yeah, let's break that down sector by sector. The president talked about the GDP growth and improvement in living standards. Do you think the people are actually feeling the growth?
I was shocked. Honestly, I was shocked to hear the president touting about the GDP growth because GDP, it is a classical, it is an old school model to measure growth and development of any nation. You can have a GDP growth of 7% or plus. If it doesn't reflect on the livelihood of citizens, then there is no development. Because for development to occur in any nation, you need to ask yourself fundamental questions. And one of those fundamental questions is what happened to the education of that country? What happened to the health sector? What happened to the agriculture? The socioeconomic standard of people there, the living standard, this. So these are the questions that pop up. So the GDP, in fact, people are now doing away with the classical measurement of development using GDP as growth rate to measure the development. I was shocked when I hear the president mention this issue. So for me, if you speak to average Gambian, they will tell you that basic commodity is skyrocketing. That is the basic, food. Gambia, the staple food is rice. So these are some of the issues. Again, with regards to some of the commodities, of course, the prices are kind of bit uh, reducing. One can say that because we also need to speak the reality on the ground. Because now I think you can get a bag of, it depends on the type of rice also. You can get some bag of rice around 2,000, something like that. But also the quality comes into play there also. Uh, the, the general living standard of an average Gambian, if you ask an average Gambian, it is pretty high. And I believe that it doesn't reflect the reality on the ground. In fact, mere fact that the government is using GDP as a measurement of development, that is mind-boggling for me, honestly. Because
I want to ask you, if the economy is growing, why are people still struggling?
that is the issue, because it is not reflective. Because if actually, the GDP, then there should be a trickle down effect. There is no trickle down effect in the economy, because that is what is happening. There is no trickle. If actually the GDP is around 6.8 or 6.9 that they mentioned, down effect in the economy, because the economy, okay, we have a free market economy like they mentioned, but if you critically look at it also, especially sector by sector, again, look at the cement, for example, the construction, which the government also tout because trying to talk about the construction side. Cement is kind of monopolized. So that's the reason why bag of cement is, it's on the rise. I think now is around 415. That is jar oil. The others are like 450, 450 going up, blah, blah. So these are some of the issues that we need to critically examine.
You talked about the cement. That's the market price. Do you think the president knows the reality when you go to the market today?
You know, I think one thing I also believe is like I think the president is not helping himself, and also I believe the so-called advisors of the president are also misleading, giving the president false information. So this is the problem that the government is having currently. So the other problem with the current government is has something to do with openness. Sometimes in government it is very important for you to be open. And how can you be open? Openness comes with effective communication. So one of the major deficiency of the current government, in my opinion, is the inadequacy in terms of communication. The way they communicate, I believe, they need to improve. Of course, Dr. Cisse is doing a great job trying to at least come up with some activities where ministers will come share their policies with but it goes beyond that. It's just like democracy. When you are defining democracy based on we conduct a free fair election and it is finished. Democracy goes beyond voting. Yeah. So these are some of the issues that we have in the country, right? But the
And
economy is
also,
not
it's
in good.
possible for a country to grow economically while its people feel poorer.
No, because I think there's a problem here when we tend to focus more on economy. Because one thing is your governance system cannot have so many inadequacies and you expect to flourish economically. There is a connection between governance and economy. So that's why I always believe political independence or political rights obviously supersede. Then you have the economic rights, but these two, they go hand in hand. So if you look at the governance structure in the Gambia, there are too many lapses, too many gaps. So these gaps need to be filled. Otherwise, the economy will be the same because there is a correlation. There is a positive correlation between these two. That is political development and economic development. In fact, if you ask academicians, scholars, which one supersede, they will tell you political development supersede. Because once you get the political development right, economic development will follow suit. So the illusion that the economy is doing fine and looking at the governance structure of the country, high rate of corruption in the regime, it is kind of how do I put this one? It is very sad and disheartening to hear people talking about the economy is progressing, the economy is resilient. Resilient in what sense? Because if you even look at the currency, the dollar is depreciating against the major currency.
Yeah.
Dollar is around what? Last time I checked, I think 2 weeks back or so, it was around 73.5, if I'm not right. When you go to pound sterling, I think that one is around 90 is going to, I'm not too sure. Euro also the same. So I don't understand their idea or their concept of economy is doing fine. We have economic